The Chicago Bears just flipped the whole NFC on its head, and almost nobody outside that locker room saw it coming. One moment they were fighting for respect, the next they are sitting in the top spot of the conference with the road to the number 1 seed sitting right in front of them. Now all of that momentum walks straight into Lambeau Field in freezing weather, with Green Bay standing between Chicago and a chance to control the entire playoff picture. If the Bears walk out of that stadium with a win, the story of this season changes overnight. If they stumble, every other contender in the NFC suddenly smells blood again. This is no just another rivalry game or a fun chapter of Packers week content. This matchup decides how the rest of the North is going to feel for years. For a long time, Green Bay owned this division in the biggest moments. But this Chicago team looks and feels different. Like they have a punishing run game, a smart, aggressive coaching staff, and a defense that is starting to punch back instead of just hanging on. Add the cold, the 10 to 15 degree air, the single-digit wind chill, the old-school NFC North energy, and you get a game where offensive linemen, running backs, and linebackers are going to decide more than any storyline on paper. The crazy part is that none of this confidence comes out of nowhere. It all started when Chicago walked into Philadelphia and pushed the Eagles around for 4 quarters, running the ball at will and making life hard for Jalen Hurts while still respecting how dangerous he is. That night is where this version of the Bears was born, with backs like DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai turning simple handoffs into body blows that never stopped landing. To really understand why this team now believes it can walk into Lambeau and win, you have to rewind to that performance in Philly and break down exactly how they took over that game from the first drive. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Bears and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 500 likes on this video. The Chicago Bears walked into Philadelphia in the kind of game where most people expected them to get tested, not to take control, and they flipped that script from the first drive. Against a tough Eagles front and a loud primetime crowd, they did not win with fluke plays or lucky bounces. They won with a style that travels, heavy runs, and clean execution. Both DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai crossed the century mark on the ground, and the offense kept answering every push from Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown by moving the chains again and again. It felt less like an upset and more like a team quietly proving on a big stage that their identity on offense is real. What made that night so powerful for Chicago was how every piece on offense fit together around that ground attack. The offensive line was firing off the ball, creating space at the first level so that DeAndre Swift could bounce outside and cut back into open grass, while Kyle Monangai slammed downhill and dragged tacklers for extra yards. You are talking about over 250 rushing yards from the backs, which does not happen unless the line and the runners are in perfect sync. At the same time, Caleb Williams played exactly the kind of game this team needs, getting the ball out on time, hitting Cole Kmet and DJ Moore on simple, smart throws, picking his spots to attack, and never letting the moment rush him. That balance is why the Eagles' defense never truly dictated terms, even with all their talent. On the other side of the ball, that statement win came at a real cost in effort and hits, and that is where the story starts to get even more serious. Big bodies like Andrew Billings and Gervon Dexter were battling inside on every snap. Corners like Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon had to chase and tackle in space, and by the end of the night, you could see how much energy it took to keep Jalen Hurts out of rhythm. Now, those same players have to turn around and get ready for a freezing matchup in Green Bay where the temperature, the field, and the opponent all punish tired legs and sore joints. Before we talk about how the Bears want to attack the Packers, we have to look at the injury report and figure out which Chicago starters are actually healthy enough to survive another brutal game in the cold. The Chicago Bears are chasing the number 1 seed while fighting a different battle that does not show up on any highlight reel, the battle to simply have their best players healthy on the field in brutal cold. Every new injury report feels like a test. Names sliding between limited, did not practice, and full participant, while the temperature around Lambeau stays stuck near 10 degrees with wind that cuts straight through pads. This is the kind of game where your body aches before kickoff, and fans are asking one simple question when they see that list: who is actually going to be ready to hit for 4 full quarters? At the center of that question is TJ Edwards, who has started to work his way back with limited participation, and would be a huge lift in the middle of the defense. His instincts and tackling in the gaps are exactly what you want when a back like Josh Jacobs is trying to pound the ball inside over and over. The Bears also got good signs from Jaylon Johnson, who handled his first game back from groin surgery and practiced fully, and from Noah Sewell, who has moved past the elbow issue and can rotate in at linebacker. Behind them, players like DeMarco Jackson and Amen Ogbongbemiga have held things together in recent weeks, and if they can stay on the field with TJ Edwards returning, Chicago suddenly has real choices in the second level instead of patching holes every series. On offense, the picture is similar, not perfect, but manageable if bodies hold up. Rome Odunze keeps showing up on the report with that foot and ankle problem, yet he has been battling through it for weeks, and the expectation is that he will suit up again. Kyle Monangai has been carefully managed early in practice weeks so that his legs stay fresh for game day, and his physical style becomes even more important when the field gets hard and slippery. In the secondary, Tyreek Stevenson and his hip are still a concern, with Ruben Hippolyte also nursing a shoulder, so his progress will be watched closely after missing time. Add in pieces like Dominique Robinson and Andrew Billings coming back from concussions, and you can see why this staff is trying to squeeze every healthy snap from the roster. The Bears are patching themselves together for a Cold War at Lambeau, but the twist is that Green Bay has its own long list of injuries, and some of those names could quietly tilt this matchup before the ball is even kicked. Green Bay walks into this game carrying more damage than most fans realize, and it starts right in the one place you never want to be thin, the defensive line. Devontae Wyatt looks like a serious long-term problem. Lucas Van Ness has already been seen in a boot, and depth pieces like Savion Williams are not locked in either. The Packers even had to bring in Jordan Riley from another team just to add an extra big body inside, which tells you how nervous they are about surviving 4 quarters in the trenches. In a freezing matchup where every snap feels heavier on tired legs, having question marks across that front is the kind of quiet danger that can tilt a game before the first whistle. Behind that line, the list of players dealing with something is long, and every name changes how Green Bay can call a defense. Josh Jacobs is still managing his own issue while they expect him to carry a big load on offense. On the perimeter and at the second level, you see names like Matthew Golden, Dontavion Wicks, Zach Tom, Carl Brooks, Javon Bullard, Edgerrin Cooper, Nate Hobbs, Barron Sorrell, and Key Walker all showing up as limited, which usually means they can play but not at full strength for long stretches. Then you add the practice window group, Marshawn Lloyd with his calf, Jaden Reed trying to ramp up, plus Colin Oliver and Brenton Cox hoping to be activated for depth. On paper, it looks like plenty of options, but in real time, it often turns into a rotation of guys who are tough enough to suit up, but do not quite have their normal burst. That is where the matchup gets really interesting for Chicago, because a defense built on patched together snaps is the exact kind of unit that hates seeing a run heavy attack that pounds away for 4 full quarters. A front that already lost Devontae Wyatt might not have Lucas Van Ness and has to lean on late additions like Jordan Riley is going to feel every block from this Bears offensive line. When linebackers like Key Walker and young defensive backs such as Nate Hobbs and Jaden Reed are forced to tackle again and again in the cold, cracks start to show. The real question now is simple. How does Ben Johnson design the Chicago ground game to keep pressing on those weak spots until something finally gives? And how did DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai turn that plan into another long night for a tired defense? The Chicago Bears did not stumble into this rushing attack by accident. It was built piece by piece by Ben Johnson with a very clear idea in mind. When you watch the tape, the plays might look simple at first. Hand the ball to DeAndre Swift or Kyle Monangai and let them go. But the picture is never simple for the defense. You see motion across the formation, tight ends sliding into the backfield, linemen stepping one way while the back threatens another lane. Defenders are forced to guess, hesitate, and then deal with a back who is already at full speed. That constant stress is what turns basic outside zone and inside zone calls into something that feels like a puzzle you can never fully solve over 4 quarters. To make that work, Chicago rebuilt the heart of the offensive line with players who fit this style. Joe Thuney brings veteran control and footwork, Jonah Jackson is a tone setter who moves people in the run game, and Drew Dahlman is the steady center who can reach, block, and climb to linebackers without losing balance. On the right side, Darnell Wright has grown into a real force, sealing edges and washing defenders down the line, while Ozzie Trapilo on the left is settling in and learning how to use his length in space. Then you add tight ends like Cole Kmet and Durham Smythe acting like extra blockers from different spots, sometimes at the line, sometimes as a fullback, and the defense never gets the same picture twice. The job for DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai is to read those moving parts, trust the blocks, and hit the crease before the defense even knows which gap is alive. The result of all that design and execution shows up in the numbers on early downs, where the Bears used to lag and now sit near the very top of the league. Last season, they were buried near the bottom in rushing yards on first and second down, which meant long third downs, obvious passing situations, and extra pressure on Caleb Williams. This year, they are putting up around 135 rushing yards per game on those early downs, the best mark in football, and that changes everything. Now, 2nd and 6 feels normal, 3rd and 2 is common, and play action actually scares defenses because they have already been gashed on the ground. It is the perfect stage for a featured back to shine, and nobody has taken advantage of this setup more than DeAndre Swift, who has turned the system into a personal comeback story that might be one of the most important keys to the Bears' entire season. The wildest part of the Chicago Bears surge is that their most explosive weapon on offense is a player many people were ready to move on from not long ago. DeAndre Swift went from the guy everyone questioned to the one name defenses circle on the game plan, then still struggled to slow down when the ball is in his hands. Against Philadelphia, he did just put up a big box score. He looked like he controlled the tempo of the entire night, cutting, gliding, and finishing runs while the Eagles' front started to wear down. In a league full of flashy moments, this feels like a quiet star turn, a veteran back rewriting his story right as Chicago is fighting for the top seed in the conference. What makes this version of DeAndre Swift so dangerous is no just speed, it is how he sees the field inside Ben Johnson's system. Last year, he sat under the mark of 4 yards per carry, and there were real talks about replacing him. This year, he is reading blocks with patience, then exploding when a crease appears, which is how you get a night where he averages around 7 yards per carry on the road against a strong Eagles front. When the play flows outside, he has the burst to turn the corner, and when the lane opens inside, he plants and gets vertical before linebackers can square up. Pair that with the way Kyle Monangai leans through contact and keeps drives alive, and you suddenly have a backfield that feels like a constant punch to the body instead of a home run swing that only lands once in a while. The next layer is what this rise means for everything around him. As long as DeAndre Swift keeps running like this, Chicago does not need Caleb Williams to play hero ball. They can let him pick his spots while the ground attack does the heavy lifting and keeps the clock moving. It also gives the front office real choices because a player who once looked like a cut candidate now feels like someone you might want to keep in the building when you think about next year. Most importantly, every time DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai force safeties to creep closer to the line, they make life much easier for the other side of the ball. The Bears defense now gets to attack quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love from a position of strength, and the way Dennis Allen has been dialing up pressure and coverage is starting to look like its own problem for the rest of the NFC. The Chicago Bears did something to the Philadelphia offense that very few teams have been able to pull off. They made Jalen Hurts look unsure. On paper, he had weapons all over the field and a crowd ready to explode, yet snap after snap you could see him double clutch, drift in the pocket, and fire throws that were just a little off. That did not happen by luck. It came from a defensive plan that kept changing the picture while still protecting the back end, forcing Jalen Hurts to play fast without ever feeling fully comfortable. For a quarterback who usually punishes hesitation, the strange part was how often he was the one hesitating. The Chicago Bears are sitting in a spot that used to feel impossible on top of the NFC, with every other contender looking up at them and waiting for a mistake. One slip and they can drop into the crowd. One strong run and they can lock in home field all the way to January. The path is brutal. Trips to Green Bay and San Francisco, the Browns at home, another showdown with the Packers, and a late date with the Lions. That is not a soft landing, that is a truth test. If Chicago comes out of that stretch with 12 or 13 wins, nobody can call them a surprise anymore. They become the team everyone else has to solve. What makes this race so wild is how many angles are already tilting toward Chicago even before those final weeks kick off. Like, they already own the head-to-head edge over the Eagles. After what they did to Jalen Hurts, they have a cleaner NFC record than teams like the Rams and Seahawks and Packers. If they split or sweep Green Bay, they tighten their grip on the North and push Jordan Love into a chase he cannot control. If they beat San Francisco, they close off another path for a late push from a healthy Niners group. Meanwhile, the Cowboys, Buccaneers, Lions, Seahawks, and even a wild card team like the Panthers are fighting their own battles just to stay in range. Every time one of those teams loses a coin flip game, the Bears gain more room to breathe. The real fun starts when you imagine how this looks once the bracket is set, and Soldier Field is the place everyone has to visit. Into a windy Chicago winter and deal with a rested defense and a fresh ground attack led by DeAndre Swift, while Caleb Williams picks his spots in front of a home crowd that finally believes again. Some fans will dream of the easiest possible first-round opponent. Others will want a shot at a big name right away to prove this rise is real. Either way, the question hanging over the entire conference is the same: if the Bears keep stacking wins and stay in that number one slot, which contender actually wants to walk into their house in January and try to take it from them?